to your childhood. It's publicly known that you moved to Australia at a very young age with your mum. And it's also very well known that she's had, like most mothers, but in your case, maybe even more so, a tremendous influence on how you grew up, what you believed in, what you did and didn't do, and so on and so forth. So 2 questions. One, did she have anything to do with cricket and you coming together? And the second is, we're going to talk about your tattoo. So I'm just going to give you a heads up on that. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
The cricket, the mum, and how, as a single mother, all those years ago in Australia, did the 2 of you sort of make your own lives, especially yours?
Prakash, it could be 30 minutes into the start of the Boxing Day test and my mum will still ask, who's winning, dear? She's still got no real concept of the game, bless her. When she grew up in a very small country town called Rutherglen. As you know, Australia's, loves this sport, and cricket's been, the sport of summer for forever and a day. But she's not a sports person. She gets it. She understands the importance of it to our culture, and understands the importance of cricket and sport to me more broadly. But it just doesn't rock her boat. Like she can sit there and watch me play, but I could play the worst shot in the world and go out for an absolute golden duck, and she'd go, "Oh, well played, dear." It's just, she just wants me to be happy and enjoy whatever I'm doing, sort of thing. So it wasn't mum that got me into the game of cricket, but she is the reason why I'm involved so much in it, because she was so supportive. So she'd do all the driving to trainings, or whether it was little aths or basketball, what have you, but to cricket, she's always there for a phone call or, a chat about, what's going on in the space. It was probably more so my dad, because of his Trinidadian background. I didn't meet him until I was 16, but he knew a lot of the West Indian cricketers in England. So he knew the Malcolm Marshalls and John Gardners and the like. So when the West Indies toured to Australia, he would organise for them to bring me signed Wisden cricket magazines and the like. And so when the West Indies toured in the 70s, 80s in Melbourne, Melbourne back then was a really white city. We're probably the 3rd largest Greek city in the world. And then we had this a wonderful influx of the Vietnamese and the Asian influences, but there wasn't a lot of, black people around. So to the point where if I did see someone else my colour or darker, you'd sort of give a little bit of a nod and acknowledgement in the streets back then. It was sort of like that. So when the West Indies toured, when they toured, they were winning and they were great and everyone loved them. And I'm like, yeah, that's me, So I think I probably, because of that connection and understanding, that's how I sort of, got into cricket. It was Dad's sport as well, so there's a connection there a little bit. And I love the team element of cricket. I did little aths, as I mentioned, and I enjoyed it, but it was the relays that I loved. So I knew I was always going to gravitate more towards team sports. And cricket, thankfully, I was only lucky that I got to a high school that had a geography teacher who was Peter Hanscom's dad, John Hanscom. We got a team together and they got us involved in the local team, and it sort of went on from there.
Fantastic. So now,
I can't remember the second part of your question because I keep waffling on about other things.
I know. No. That's perfectly fine. That's exactly what we want. We just want people to know Mel Jones, different from the wonderful broadcaster that most of them will often see. Let's come to the tattoo.
That's what it was.
There's been so much about that. And when you see the pattern on your, I think it's on your ankle, it's very obvious to those of us who know that it looks like a radio sine wave.
Yeah.
First of all, is that right, or is that a different pattern?
No.
And if it is, then presumably it says something. If you're okay with it, will you share it with all of us?
Yeah, I'd love to. I've never thought that I'd ever really get a tattoo. Never been in my conscious thought. I think probably because I always thought I was never passionate about something enough to get something like that. And then it started speaking again. Ebbs is going to come up in this conversation quite a bit. Ebbs and Isha and Nat Germanos and I were just chatting a couple of years ago about a variety of different things, and tattoos came up. And so we always thought we'd all go off together and get one, but we all sort of didn't know what we were going to get in time and all being in the same place in the same time. But I'd started thinking about it. And so I always thought that if I did get something, it would be something to do with my mum. but I still didn't know quite what. And then I came across the fact that the whole concept of my job now is to use your voice. And there's a big thing that I sort of grapple with on a number of occasions is people have a voice, but how can you best use it? When to be really strong with it, when not to be, just in terms of inflection, but also the words that you're using. So all these sorts of things were traveling around in my mind. And I came across, I must have been recording something, and I just saw the sound wave, and I thought, oh, that's sort of what I do. And then I thought, I'm going to have a sit down with my mum and find out, just a conversation with her of, you know, how she sees the world and her values in life. So we had a conversation about it, and she sent me a wonderful email which drills down to what my tattoo is, and it's 4 words basically of how she sees the world, and it's respect, balance, love and hope. So I recorded her saying that, and I got the producer to make a photo image of that. And it's interesting too, because I said exactly the same phrase, and I've got that myself, that sits below it, not on the tattoo, and it's completely different. I have such a lower voice tone than what my mum does, and it looks completely different, but it's exactly the same 4 words. So yeah, got that. And I was originally going to get it on my arm because I thought it'd be nice when I've got the mic, but it was too big, so I didn't want it to be too big. So I don't know if this could be quite interesting here, but I don't know if this is working so there you go, it's upside down, but there it goes right across there. So, and I can see it too, which is nice.
Brilliant. Well, that's actually in a way very moving, and thank you for sharing that, because that's very special to carry something like that on your person. And you know, why I personally, none of my business, but why I prefer it where it is simply because there is, I think, a degree of intimacy that you want to keep, and a degree that you want to share with the world. So I think you've got the perfect balance. Let's move on to something slightly different. Your travels and your career as you played cricket for Australia. World Cup winner, missed out once out of the 2 World Cups I think that you played for. But your memories of those playing days, I know you got 100 on debut, which is fantastic, but didn't do much with the bat after that. So when you look back on your playing career in the golden Australia, do you feel that in that era there were limitations that came about as a result of whatever, maybe infrastructure, opportunities, amount of cricket, professionalism or the lack of it, etc.? And if you were to play it in today's world, do you think you would approach the game any differently than you did, let's say, 10, 15 years ago?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I think the game has moved on exponentially since we were playing, because of a myriad of reasons, as you just mentioned, you know, just resources, you know, professionalism in terms of full-time contracts, it's your career, all those sorts of things. But there was I look at the girls today, and because you're traveling with them at the same time when you're commentating on them, there's elements of what I was lucky enough to experience and enjoy that they actually probably don't get. And I think a few of them, you know, I've chatted to the likes of someone like a Molly Strano, who's an old soul cricketer, but in a 28-year-old body. And she said, oh, that would have been great back then, because she can see I suppose the purity of just travel. Like we were on planes, trains and buses around India or England and the like, in, you know, not 5-star hotels around the world. And the way you just experience the world is completely different to what they do now, flying business class and staying in 5-star hotels and not probably getting out as much and experiencing things. So would I have been a different cricketer? I would have been a different cricketer, probably a different person. Yeah, without a doubt.
We prefer you like this. Sorry to interrupt you, but just building on that, Mel, if you were to choose, right, that sort of limited exposure, limited glamour, whatever you want to call it, because it wasn't a game that was being viewed as much, it wasn't being talked about as much. And a lot of the people who played the game played it because they loved the game. As you said, you got paid for talking about a game where the girls playing weren't being paid. To this other extreme, is there a balance that is even possible in today's world, Mel? Because obviously, so much of what goes on now I won't name the cricketer, but there's a cricketer here in India who often tells me that the reason he has to go to the gym as much is because all the pictures and photographs that come out on the sidelines of a game, it's got nothing to do with cricketing ability. It's just that he's got to look the piece.
Look the piece.
And I wonder whether that is, I mean, Kapil Dev's on record as saying, if you looked at my 2 forearms, you'll clearly see that my bowling arm is much stronger, right? So point I'm trying to ask you is all of this other stuff that's not purely about the game versus the actual game and the mindset of people, because they're all human beings, many of them younger and younger and younger, right? As they come out into this glamour world. Is there a fine balance that is possible? And in your role as a director of Cricket Australia, someone who's got a voice during global discussions on cricket, is there something that you think can be done, maybe at an early level, to help people to get that balance or deal with all of this?
Yeah, it's a tough question, Prakash, and this is probably, I'm going to have another hour on this one, I think.
We've got all the time in the world.
I think when it all boils down, at the end of the day, I always come back to just I don't want to sound too wishy-washy here, but the pure love of the game and the enjoyment factor of the game. And a lot of that to me comes down to that play element, where whether or not you're playing in the backyard and, you know, you're trying to hit your first 100 in your grandparents' backyard, as you know, I was trying to do against my cousins, to playing club cricket and going out and hitting your first ever 4, or getting, you know, past double figures for the first time, or, you know, getting your first wicket or catch. Those kinds of emotions and feelings, or standing on the balcony and just cheering on your teammates when you've won your first game or first ever club championship. Those kinds of feelings are the ones that you want our elite professional cricketers to still be able to enjoy in some ways. And I think we get fast-tracked out of that very, very quickly these days. So as soon as, the footages I'm seeing of little 5, 6-year-old girls in India at the moment playing better shots than I ever played at the moment is scary, but also very, very exciting. But that fast track into this professional world where you're removed from that is almost like it is 2 different games. And yes, you want to see the best of the best playing and putting skill sets on display. But you mentioned Kapil Dev, he was one of the best. And he didn't have all of what is in the game today. So can we get a balance? I think it'd be tough. You'd have to shift the mindset of people more so than anything else, not just the players, but everyone else watching it as well. And are people happy with that shift? Would be. Sorry, I'm asking myself questions and yourself questions here. I just don't know. I think it's sad in a ways. I mean, I class myself as an average cricketer in a magnificent team, not just because of their skill set, but the way in which they went about the game as well. So it was a professional team in their approach in an amateur setup. And I think that was beautiful for me, because I got the best of both worlds. So I got to be in and around these amazing athletes and women who are now big contributors to the game and the development of the game, but also in a space where you can enjoy that playfulness of the game and travel and all those sorts of stuff as well.
That's again wonderful to know. Yes, I do agree that the balance is not easy, but you know, with people like you and others like Ebony, who's doing some great work with Surrey as well, I hope that this balance will come through, because I think for both men and women, younger cricketers coming out, just dealing with everything in itself is an education which many of them don't get an opportunity to. And it's easy to falter because everything's under a microscope, isn't it? And that takes away the humanness almost of what you're doing. Anyway, you're right, we could talk about...
And on that, Prakash, is that there's the players these days, because of the scrutiny and they're under the microscope, is that how many decisions would you and I make a day would be, you'd probably make, 100,000 decisions a day, from, what to wear and what cup of tea you're going to have and all those sorts of things. And we get a lot of decisions wrong every day as well, but no one sees them. But all of a sudden, when you're in the public eye like this, and you make one bad decision, it is magnified, and sometimes rightly so, sometimes probably not. So that is a really tough thing, particularly when you're very young and you're still forming your own concept of the world and yourself and all that sort of stuff. That's a tough place to be in. And I think we need to be really respectful and mindful of that as we develop these young cricketers.